I'm Danielle Smith for Common Sense Calgary. We are interviewing candidates for the upcoming civic election for Calgary City Council, and joining me now is your Ward 3 candidate, Gurbir Nijjar. Gurbir, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Danielle, for having me.
So let's begin. Tell us why it is you decided that you wanted to run for council at this time.
Yeah, Danielle, it's no secret that the upcoming election is very important. It's huge. With half a council set to turnover and a new mayor, we need the right people at the council table now more than ever to guide us through this pandemic, steer us through, but also set us up for the future. And I came to the city about 10 years ago, and I'm originally from BC, and I came for one thing, and that was opportunity. The opportunity to build an incredible life, which I've been thankful to have been able to do here in Calgary. And Calgary offers so much, access to well-paid jobs, housing affordability, recreation, amenities, services, you name it. I love this place. And, given what's going on with our economy and obviously a global pandemic, like I said, we need the right people at the council level to steer us forward and kind of really regain and reset the opportunity for others who will eventually come to call Calgary home. So that's really the reason why I'm running.
Let's connect that with the kind of work that you've done in the past. So how do you think what you've done in the private sector has prepared you to oversee the decisions of council?
Absolutely. No, my career started here in Calgary 10 years ago when I moved here, and I worked in downtown Calgary in the oil patch. I also worked up north in Fort McMurray on the same project. So I worked for an EPC company on the Husky Sunrise project, which Husky now is part of Cenovus. But in 2013, actually, I got laid off just before the oil sector really cooled off. And from there, I landed in municipal government with Rocky View County, which is Calgary's neighbor. We surround Calgary on three sides, on the east, west, and north. That's when things really for me took off. And, from there at Rocky View, I supervised the engineering team. I managed the recreation, parks, and social support department. And now I manage the planning and development department, which is about 30 of us, 30 planners, engineers, officers of the organization. So we work with our council very regularly. We're meeting weekly at the moment. But, what I've gained and learned as a member of public administration are huge assets would be huge assets to me should I be successful in this run. Just understanding kind of the ins and outs of municipal government, what you can and cannot do, and just understanding how to work with the public, work with our council, how to build relationships, partnerships, and be influential. And really, my experience in local government is going to be an asset to me in the role, but that's not really the primary reason of why, I should be in the role. And I think we all know that, one vote on its own doesn't mean a whole lot. You have to be able to form partnerships and relationships with your council peers to get things done. And that is my real strength. And so that's the background that I bring, Danielle, to the council. Should I be successful?
I must ask, because there has been a bit of a, shall we say, rocky relationship between the city of Calgary and County of Rocky View, and I'm curious if you could give some thoughts on that, because I think there's a sense that Rocky View County is kind of hemming in the city's growth with some of the projects that they've had. And so now there's this notion that we need a regional growth board to manage some of those corridors. So you probably can now see it from both points of view, especially since you're running for Calgary City Council, but give us your perspective on that.
Yeah, for sure. And I have to be careful. I work for Rocky View and they're my employer and they're really good to me. But I will speak candidly about it. And yeah, I think we can all agree that what's good for the region is what's best for the region. And I think, working collaboratively together and towards an end goal of doing what's best for everyone who lives in the region, that's kind of what I meant to say, is good. But like anything in life, Danielle, there has to be a willingness to work together and work collaboratively. And I think, there's been a long-standing relationship between the two organizations, and some things have gone well and some things have not gone so well. I think really, to be honest, what's going to take to move this forward is to have at least on the city side, I'll say, is have a council who's willing to work with others and our neighbors. And in this case, we're talking about Rocky View County, and see how do we best work together to deliver on the needs of the whole region. And I think, obviously each council represents their constituents, their residents. So there's going to be, competing interests, and there's going to be a need for people for each organization to be competitive. But the outcome is to attract or build or develop and grow in a feasible, realistic, and an efficient manner. And that's what the board has been set up to achieve. If it's achieved that, I'm not going to really comment too much on that because I know there's so many opinions about it, good and bad. But I think we're not done yet. There's a lot more work to be done to further what the vision of that board was to begin with.
All right. Let me talk to you a little bit about the person who was in the riding before, Jody Gondek. She currently represents it, but she's running for mayor, so it is an open seat after in this election. So one of the issues that she had was trying to figure out a way for Rocky View County and the city to either share in the revenue or in some way share in the growth, because there's going to be a huge amount of growth in sort of that northeastern quadrant of the city. Do you have some thoughts on how that should proceed?
Yeah, it's a really good question. You asked some great questions, Danielle. Tax sharing and revenue sharing is contentious, and we know that. Money going either way across the border, there needs to be demonstrated not interest, but a demonstrated sort of return on the money that one organization gives or receives. And I think what it's going to take is a bit of horse trading, a bit of back and forth. If we share in the revenue on certain properties, what does the other organization get back in return? And again, I kind of circle back to the first answer that there needs to really be a willingness to want to work together and want to be part of the region and want to do what's good for both sides. And obviously on both sides of the equation, one entity might feel that they're getting more raw into the deal. So that's why we need, in a way, I said in the intro to this conversation, we need the right people at the council table. What I mean by that in this context is we need the right people who are willing to work, again, collaboratively with each other, so to advance the needs of, the city and also the residents of the county. So, and again, it's, I think it's going to take, it's going to take time. It's going to take give and take, and there has to be a proven or a demonstrated benefit if there's going to be some kind of revenue sharing across the table, because we know.
Okay.
Sorry, that's the answer to that question.
No,
Sorry.
that's great.
I can go all day about this.
I know, and I want to make sure that we're not making it only about that one issue, just because you've got expertise in that area. I do want to make sure that we talk about Ward 3, because Jody Gondek has been a very active council member. So I'm interested in knowing, is there anything that she's done over the last 4 years that you would have done differently?
Councillor Gondek is a great councillor, and I'm not going to go on any venue and say she's not. She's a very good councillor. I think she's done a bang up job. And if I could repeat what she's done in the 4 years she was there, I would deem that to be quite successful. And I think she's a good advocate. For our ward, for Ward 3. I think she's a good voice for the city, and I don't think there's much I would probably go and do differently. She takes time. Yeah.
Then let me ask you about the top issues that you're hearing currently. So on a go forward basis, what do you think the three priorities are for Ward 3?
So the priorities that things I'm hearing in my ward. We've started now going door to door. They're not really knocking, but trying to catch people outside. Given the time of year, people are in their yards and our kids are outside playing. Love to see that. In our ward, a big thing, Danielle, is taxation. What we're seeing is steady increase in taxes year after year. And, taxes is a relatively complex thing as to how it gets calculated and where it gets transferred, who carries the weight, and et cetera. But the one thing is true is that the taxes have steadily increased in properties in our ward, I'll say at least, for the past many years. Businesses in particular, who are hit the hardest. And what I'm hearing from these residents and more so these constituents is that we need to find a way to kind of stabilize it. No one's going to say claw it back. It's going to say that it's very difficult to claw back once you've already taxed it. But how do you stabilize and maximize the value that our residents, business owners get for the tax they pay? That's one big issue, Danielle, that we're hearing. Another big issue that we're starting to hear is also safety and a sense of security in our community. Unemployment's up, no doubt. There's no doubt about that with the pandemic, and crime is on the rise. I know the city has tried and made the task force to address, make recommendations as to what they can and cannot do to address this. But it is an issue that residents have voiced in the ward. The third thing that I'm hearing in my ward as well a lot of is the green line. It's a huge thing, infrastructure, right? And the residents of the north and in this ward have a need for better transit services. Right now we have a BRT, which takes people downtown for the most part, the 301. But one big thing is they want to see rail, and with stage one of the project kind of at a rocky start, it's already boding well for how it's going to kind of roll out for future phases. But LRT and better transit is another common theme that I'm hearing so far in my community.
All right, gosh, we've got so much to talk about there. Let's go through them one by one. So first of all, on the issue of taxes, obviously what we've seen in Calgary is that there's been two tax shifts. One has been that we became very reliant on the amount of revenue generated from downtown. When that office space went vacant and property values collapsed, that got pushed out to the businesses in the outlying communities. That became unsustainable. And so, in fact, it was Jody Gondek who was sort of pushing for some kind of transfer and sharing between the residential community. So that's one way of approaching it. Another way of approaching it is to perhaps see whether there are new tax measures that can be brought in. That's been discussed in the past. Another way is talking about seeing the province vacate the property tax arena for education tax to leave more in the city. There's just a lot of ways that you can approach the stability aspect, but what do you favor?
Like we kind of talked about in the last question, taxation is a complex issue, and there's so many things that and so impact the tax up or down, transferring it from one pot to another pot. Do you retain more of the funds because 35 cents every dollar we collect is in the city, but it doesn't stay in the city coffer; it goes to the provincial coffer. I know Councillor Gondek is in day on how do we retain and keep in our hand more of that 35%. So to me, to be honest, that's more of a tax reform or a discussion. I think that's more of a longer term initiative, and I don't disagree with it. If there's a way to keep more money in our hands, I think that's good. That's good. I'm never going to say no to that. But that's a bit more a longer looking initiative, and which will take up to the Municipal Government Act and all that. But there are a few ways to tackle this, Danielle, and I think obviously with our downtown core having have a huge issue with vacancy, over 30 to 35% vacant, a huge loss in property value. I think it was in the range of I think 60% of the value lost, about $18 billion worth of property value, given the vacancy in the tower. So the tax burden that those say properties would have held, had to be displaced. It had to be displaced someplace. Whether do you do it to business outside of the core? Do you do it to residential properties? That's what you were alluding to in the questions. That task force council had made last year to understand to best place the burden, not best place the burden, but to best distribute the tax. What's the best way to do it? And tax. It's a big thing in taxes how much you spend and how much do you need to collect from residents, obviously, right? And cities have to run a balanced budget, so you can't run in a deficit. So every dollar has to be accounted for. And one thing that I'm saying in my run for city councilor here is, do we have a bit of a spending problem? Maybe some places, maybe not. I know myself, being a professional. You get married sometimes to your ideas and things that you really lobby and push hard for. And that's why even when I opened up this conversation, I said that, we need the right people with fresh ears, fresh eyes, fresh minds to take a look at, is what we're doing today being done in the most efficient way possible? And can it be done better? So
there's a couple of issues I want to talk to you about there. One is, recognizing the problem with downtown. Do you have some thoughts on how to fill those office towers? I think the last number I heard was there's something like 100 to 140,000 employees that can be accommodated in that empty space. What do you think should be done?
It's a big problem, and it got overbuilt. I think we all know that. When I came to Calgary in 2011, it was booming, and you couldn't find office space, and now it's a complete opposite. So, there's an investment. There's going to be an investment needed on both sides, privately and publicly. And I think, we've seen now a few who ventured to convert the space from office to residential. It's not a cheap. It's a pretty costly undertaking. So, we have to find a way of, one is how do we help in making that happen? Whether the city's a part of that, whether we find different ways of doing that. Do we revitalize? Do we add catalyst projects that city invests in, or is a part of that help also spark growth around those areas and bring the lands to the highest and best use? So, I've always been a big proponent, Danielle, that a healthy downtown is a healthy Calgary. And, a big part of the tax burden is because of this issue with downtown. So we have to do our part to help incentivize and introduce catalysts to help bring the private dollars into the equation as well.
Do you have an example of how that might work, or from the work that you've done in the past for municipalities? I guess I'm looking at the $100 million set aside for Calgary economic development, and they still have a substantial amount of that left. Do you approve of that kind of approach? And maybe just give an example of how you think it might work.
Yeah, it's an OSIF fund that you're talking about, the city has, and that's their fund to help locate different emerging sectors into Calgary. And it's a polarizing conversation. Like, is it government's role to invest or bootstrap some private companies? One aspect is no. On the other aspect is, well, if you want there to be a catalyst, if you want there to be a spark to have more public dollars flow in the door, then you have to do something. So, to be honest, given the state of our economy, the city is trying to get creative, and to me, this is a creative solution to help attract and grow and bring different industries here. And if there is in this case, there is a fund to help initiate these corporations, I think it's good. I think the key metric here is the cost benefit analysis, and is the money that we put in up front, does it bring more private dollars with it down the road? And I think that needs to be clear from the beginning, and that needs to be clear to Calgarians.
Okay. You also mentioned the spending side. So I'm interested in, we'll talk about it at both operating and capital. So let's deal with the operating side first.
Sure.
Do you think that the city of Calgary is spending the right amount? Is it too little? Is it too much? And just give me some ideas of where you think you might approach things differently.
Totally. So, the city's budget, give or take $4 billion, plus or minus. That's generally how much they spend. In taxation, they tax about $2 billion. That's how much they tax and the rest of it comes through user fees and other revenue sources. What I feel, Danielle, is the city has 61 different operational or different areas of service delivery, and I think what one needs to do, a new council needs to do, once we kind of get our people through this pandemic alive, that's the biggest thing. How do we get them alive? That's number one priority. But beyond that, looking forward to our futures, can we deliver our services and things that we do in a more efficient manner? Is our administration being run in the most efficient manner? Is there a way we can cut red tape? This has been a buzzword since our UCP government has been here, but I don't disagree with it. Is there a way we can cut red tape and become more business and resident friendly? I know at Rocky View County, where I work, that's one of the big initiative our council has taken, is how can we become business friendly and become a productive member of the team and help our applicants and our business owners through our municipal processes, and how can we be a big support to them? So again, I know the city's a huge entity. It's a lot bigger than Rocky View County, but at the same time, can we take a similar approach, and can we become more business friendly? And I think, should I be successful, one thing I'd push for is a review, is understand a program review. Is it being done the right way? Is it still needed? Are there better ways to deliver it? And are there alternate service delivery methods that we can deploy to bring the cost of our service down, but also not impact the reach of it? So that's my stance on it.
Well, let me ask about alternative delivery, because there have been a couple of instances where there's been a discussion of private sector contracting out or public-private partnerships. So not snow removal. I will ask you about snow removal in just a second, but contracting out the operation of golf courses, or for instance, garbage collection. Are you generally in favor of those kinds of ideas?
Danielle, I am. So, alternate service deliveries like contracting out has, a lot of merits to it. You're creating jobs, you're incentivizing business, and I think those are all good things. And we have to really understand, though, the services that we do choose to contract out. what sort of level of service our residents can expect, and that's the biggest thing. Like if the city, let's use waste and recycling for example. If residents expect that their waste and recycling be collected on the days that are scheduled, and they happen every time, and if we're going to bring in a private contractor, which the city's now piloting, if in this example, we have to ensure that one, that level of service is maintained, but two, also it's a cost beneficial to the city's books to have a third party come in rather than have a whole fleet of trucks and an entire department that size of department dedicated towards it. So there has to be understanding of also a level of service and a cost saving measure. But golf courses and some of those things, it's a unique situation, because should the city be in the business of operating golf courses? On a high level, probably not. But you look at some of the golf courses, like McCall Lake, for example. There's also a utility aspect there too. The lands are used for different, in this case, stormwater utility. So is it having a golf course now a secondary sort of revenue generation stream on operating a traditional utility? So again, every case is a bit different. Or another way to preserve open spaces. If you were to sell the golf course to a private entity, it could be redeveloped, like we're starting to see in some of our city courses. So that's why the motive has to be correct. The reason that you contract has to be correct. The level of service needs to be also defined so that Calgarians can expect a consistent level of service.
So I wanted to ask about snow removal, because it may be a candidate for more contracting out, but lots of candidates heard plenty from upset constituents about the snow removal that didn't happen in residential areas in December. Did you hear about that? And I wonder if you've got some thoughts about how to address it.
I haven't heard per se directly my door knocking right now, but I know, being a resident and undergoing that massive snowfall that we had, it was quite frustrating. It was hard to even get our big vehicles out of our community, let alone our cars, and having pushed many people down, out of a snowbank and things like that. I think the city, this is a massive city. I think we can't discount that. I think the city's priority of routes, needs to be clear. Calls the key arterial roads, clear trunk roads, bus routes, those kind of things. This is the thing with the weather. You don't really know if it's going to happen once, twice, 5 times. It may never happen in a season. And you budget all based on, the probability of what you need. And, this happened to be an act of God kind of event. Let's call it that, really a one-time thing. And, I think the city will learn, maybe to be more equipped, prepared, have more private contractors. I think that's really the solution here, readily available to respond, should this kind of magnitude event occur again. But as for, starting to go into secondary roads, smaller roads, start clearing snow, I think that would be a bigger discussion at council, and understanding of the cost to achieve that level of service. And I think that would have to be a further discussion, but that would be a very expensive undertaking.
All right. You also talked about safety being a big issue, security being a big issue. So there hasn't in the last year been a movement that's called itself defund the police. And I think the notion behind it was to take a portion of the police budget and put it into alternative service delivery providers for mental health and addictions. So give me your sense of that movement, because you've also said that there's a concern in the area about making sure that the police are there from a security point of view. So how do you balance those issues?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a very complex thing. And defunding the police, and that's been a buzzword around the U.S. and it's spilled over here in Canada. And I don't. My take is I don't think defunding is really our solution. I think what we need with our police is to provide them with the right resources. And for example, we have here with Alberta Health Services, and the PAC team is a really good example of that, which we have medical professionals pairing with police officers to respond to the call. And I think what we need is the right responders, well equipped, well trained, to respond to the complex calls that we deal with today. And defunding is a very strong word, and it may be the answer. It may not be the answer, but I think my stance on policing is we need to provide them with the right resources to respond to the complexity of calls that we're dealing with today.
All right. I want to talk about just a few more operational spending issues. So one of the other issues that the city got involved in was that the province made a move to do centralized dispatch. Rockview County was already there, and most of the municipalities were, but it created a lot of tension with the question of, do you save money by doing this? That was the province's position, but the city's position was, do you sacrifice response time? So how do you see that issue?
Totally right. It's it's a great question, and I think response in my take of that, I didn't understand a cost saving measure was to I think centralize it. I think it was right. I think response time, especially with emergency, is a very important metric, and I think again, kind of back to that public, whether it be a public or a private service, we have to really understand, based on the metrics, how do we maintain and keep the response time, at what it needs to be. And, if doing it the way the province is suggesting also allows the response time to remain the same, then definitely we'll explore. But if there's a definite hit to that, or a decrease in response time, then we have to re-question if the strategy is sound or not.
Okay, I have to ask you about fire because I wonder if you have a bit of a different take, having seen it from a different municipality's perspective. So
Yeah.
there's two things. One that came out when we had the discussion of centralized dispatch is it became evident that the fire was responding 50% of the time or more to medical calls. It's part of the integration of EMS and fire. But then there was also a discussion about, do you build out into new communities? And one of the resistance to that was, well, do we have the money to build and resource fire halls? And so give me your take on that issue. Is there a better way to approach the fire budget?
There's something with emergencies, right, Daniel? I'll call you by your full name, Daniel Smith. Yes, there's nothing with emergency, right? And first responders respond. That's what they do, right? And it's in their nature to help. They run into the fire, not run away like we do, right? And I know Calgary has a 7-minute rule. That any community, any home shall be the first fire responders shall be able to get there within a 7-minute time frame. I think there could be a bit of a better, split as to what calls that the Calgary Fire Department tends to, and what calls the EMS and Alberta Health Services responds to. I know that they try to get first responders on the scene right away, and our firefighters are trained, both paramedics and firefighters, so they have those skills, and I feel that that's why they respond. But I just know, it's an innate response for someone in the profession to want to move and want to go and be the first on scene and help. It may not be economically or from a fiscal perspective the most responsible thing. You have a job, I have a job, they have a job. So maybe a clear scope of work that defines the break and split amongst the different parties is a good start. But maybe it starts with the dispatch and how it gets dispatched, how it gets responded to. But there's a role for all of us, for all to play, and I think making it more clear could be advantageous in saving money.
All right. Let's talk about an area which I know you have expertise because of your background, which is the capital side of the budget.
Yeah.
So let's begin with talking about the Green Line, because we're at a bit of an impasse. I think it started off with a project. Who could argue against it? 3 levels of government, $4.7 billion. It was going to be 40 kilometers, go to the deep south and the deep north, the communities that needed it. And what it's turned into now is $5.5 billion. And it bridges the center without going either to the far north or the far south. And also the transportation minister, Rick McIver, doesn't like the fact that it doesn't connect in to the existing system. So we've got a bit of an impasse, and I'm wondering how you think you would approach that to try to solve it.
These are very complex projects, as we can all appreciate, and with 3 levels of government funding it, like I said, over $5 billion, bit largest project in the history of the city. A lot of effort, work, lobbying, rallying goes behind even getting to this stage. And to be honest, Danielle, my first glance at it, I kind of saw, like, why does it kind of go the first phase? That is, it looks odd where the alignment went, but the more you look at it, in the alignments of our existing blue and red lines, it's heading into an area that's underserviced, and I feel like it's heading into an area that will eventually allow further connectivity into the corridor. And I think also one thing that on a project level, having been a project manager, you look at, well, where do our right-of-ways and alignments exist, and from a cost perspective, even though there could be an optimal alignment elsewhere, maybe you could say here or there, but you also have to work with what you have and what you have access to. And I like to assume I like to think that as that city staff and the Green Line Committee has put forward the best plan possible to have stage 1 be able to be tied into, linked, and expanded. Like, as a resident of Ward 3, I'm quite happy with the alignment coming into Ward 3. We just want it to happen sooner rather than later. So
okay, let's talk about some of the other projects that were put forward. So there are 4 major capital projects: the event center with the Calgary Flames, the BMO expansion for convention space, Arts Commons and the Foothills Fieldhouse. And when the CFO put this forward, they said that there wasn't enough money to do all four, and yet the council proceeded with approving them all anyway. So give me your take on this. Do you, if there was only one of those projects that you could have chosen, which one would it have been?
Yeah, they're all exciting projects. I don't think anybody can deny that they're not exciting. They have their benefits, but there's a cost to them. And the one to me, Danielle, stands out most is the event center. And I think it's been something that Calgarians have been talking about for a very long time. With an aging Saddle Dome, what's the plan with it? What's the capital replacement plan? What are we going to do? And to me, that's a project that I think it's a great catalyst, and it's expensive, and I think one thing that we have to really understand as Calgarians is what's going to be our ROI on that thing. Putting in about just shy of $300 million, a lot of taxpayer dollars, partnering with the Flames organization to put it forward and sharing in the revenues. But one big thing that it does, again, we talked earlier about catalysts, and I feel like in that part of downtown it really is a catalyst. It will bring further investment. It has the ability to bring the lands around it to their highest and best use, add density, and all those great things that we really need in a successful and thriving downtown. It's just that Calgary needs a fair deal. And again, I not having been on council when that was negotiated, I wasn't behind in those meetings, so I can't say otherwise. It seems like a pretty basic deal, 50-50. Calgary owns the land, they operate the building, they have a 35-year lease. It makes sense. Could it have been better? Maybe. Could have been worse? Maybe. But we got a deal, and reaching a deal is sometimes it's art of the deal, and it may be that's what maybe needed to happen with the Flames group to reach it. So that's, to me, the one that I would support of all.
Okay, let me ask you about another fairly controversial area of spending, and it's connected to capital spending as well, which is the public art program, with a certain percentage of the capital projects set aside. Maybe that's part of the problem, is you end up with weird projects like the Beaufort Towers and the wishing well, which burned holes in people's clothing at the Genesis Center and had to be removed, and the Big Blue Ring. And I wonder if do you think that program is salvageable, should be scrapped, or do you think that they've made enough changes that there aren't going to be any more embarrassments?
To be honest, Danielle, I don't think it's a priority today. So okay. I know public art it's a part of arts and culture and place of belonging. So I'm not going to say that it's not important. It has a place to be. I just think during a pandemic, when there's other priorities, I think we need to focus on different things than public art. But overall, I feel like my take is that we've kind of clearly haven't got it right because of the feedback that Calgarians have expressed with the Big Blue Ring or the Beaufort Towers or the Wishing Well. So that's why I think bringing in, if we're going to do it, I think we're going to understand when we want to do it. Maybe today isn't the best day, like I'm saying, but if you are to do it, I think you need to bring in people who are qualified in this, understand how to properly engage with people as to what they want to see, what people think, is right to be a public art, because it's going to be there forever. But clearly we haven't got it right, and I think the city's trying to address it and change their approach, but I don't think it's a priority today.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about development, because one of the big issues, and we talked earlier about some of the tension between the counties and the city, but one of the big issues is, do you densify and build up so that you can take advantage of the existing infrastructure, or do you do greenfield and build out? And I want to know how you would approach that balance.
It's a great question. It's a $1 million question. Who has the right answer, the right equation, will be a millionaire. But you know what it is? We know from an efficiency perspective, going up and densification is the answer. If desirability was not the question, going up and densifying is, to me, the solution. But that's not what Calgarians desire. I used to live in the Beltline. When I moved to Calgary, I was in Saddle Ridge, but then I moved to Inglewood. That we lived in the Beltline, and we enjoyed that. But when we had a young family, we moved to Panorama Hills, where I live right now. We built a brand new house, because from a cost perspective, you can have a single or detached home or a larger space and a yard and all that at a similar price that you could buy, say, a condominium or a condominium style property, say, in one of the inner cities. So I think the answer, Danielle, to this is both. you're going to have to do both. You're going to do both because the customer, the Calgarian, is going to want the ability to have both offerings, but you have to control it. And if you're going to do greenfield development, it has to be responsible growth. It has to pay its own way. Why should somebody living, in the southern end of the city, hypothetically, be paying for infrastructure in the north end that only benefits a brand new community? So that's why, the public purse to me should not be overly used to support infrastructure in particular, to support these brand new communities. But at the same time, building the way we build is the product that people desire. So that's why there's a fine line that council has to walk in understanding how do you continue to build out and offer the products a lot of young families and want, like mine, but how do you also build density, which we know what we need for a thriving and a more efficient city. So that's my take on that.
On that point, the guidebook for great communities turned out to be pretty controversial, and I'm wondering what your take on it is. Is there a problem with the plan? Is there a problem with the communication of the plan? Is the problem that there's a lot of folks who were working on it for 10 years and then it was the broader community was taken by surprise? Give me your sense of what your constituents are telling you about it.
Yeah, for sure. No, there's not too much conversation I've had so far in my ward about that book. It's more so the inner cities that are more so impacted by it. And I've had a lot of conversations with those who live in those communities and what their take are, those who know the planning a bit better than I do. And, the first thing is that the document's very non-committal. It contains no should statements. So a council does not necessarily have to follow it, but it's still a statutory plan. So in a way, it's kind of like, well, you want to do it, but you're not really committing to it. So that's the first aspect, the first thing I see in that, like it should everything is a should. But, I think one thing people or residents kind of really push back on is really well thought out. Some of these inner city communities in which, people like living on their single family wide lot, is it even feasible to put a more dense product next to them or in these areas? And I think one thing is the city could have engaged more. Sure, you could always, as a member administration, you could always engage more. It's just what it is, but you have to move forward eventually. And I think that's what the city did here. But I think what needs to come to this plan is the actual feasibility. Can somebody buy that land in that community and do what the guidebook says? And I think that's one part of the equation that's missing. And a lot of our cities that have plans missing is a feasibility aspect of it. Is it even economically viable to do what you think that you want them to do? And I think that's one aspect if I'm elected to want to really bring to the table is how do we bring that feasibility business sense to the table?
All right, let's talk about your role as an elected member, because you've worn an administrative hat. So the first question I want to ask you around that is there seems to be a sense that the administration drives a lot, and there's a lot of behind closed doors meetings, more than any other major municipality. And I'm wondering if you can give some context or perspective on that. Do you think that the council members need to direct more? Do you think it's the right balance? Do you think there's something wrong with that relationship?
Administration is council's subject matter experts. Council only has one employee. That's a city manager, the CAO. And the CAO then takes that direction council, the strategic vision, and implements it across his or her administration. And we started this interview. I said we need the right people, and when I say we need the right people, we need councillors who have background skill sets that complement and can work with administration. Because with administration, you're going to have people of various different professions working, bringing forward their expertise and alignment with our strategies. But we need to have people who are solutions based, understand is there a win-win? Can we do it better? Is there an alternative way of doing it? And I think with council, I think by having councillors who have some kind of experience in various, my experience is planning and development, but other aspects as well, finance and whatever. We need councillors who have that experience, who can not challenge administration, but work with administrations to come up with an optimal solution. And again, it's not our job to, as councillors, it's our job to decide. And administration comes up and administration provides us the tools and good information to make a good decision. But I think working with our administration better is a solution to, I think, to this. And because I've heard the same discussion in my workplace as well. So.
It's a problem all over. So let me ask you about this other balance, that how much do you, as the elected representative, make decisions on behalf of your constituents versus when do you go to the public and let them decide? Because we've seen referenda on the Olympics, where there's going to be a referenda on fluoride. The considered a referendum on reducing speed limits to 40 kilometers an hour in residential areas, but decided to make that decision themselves. How do you see it? Would you prefer to see more referenda, or would you prefer to make all the decisions as the elected representative?
You know what? It's a good question. And I actually thought that came in my mind today, randomly, before you even asked this question. Like, what's a good split? And where do you draw a line as to where council decides on behalf of the constituents they represent, or where do you go to plebiscite? And where do you ask the general population what you think? And, I felt the Olympic ask was a good one. It's a huge undertaking. Economic benefit. You can go all day and name, the pros and cons of that kind of project. Same with fluoride, very polarizing topic. I feel that, should the item be, or the topic, sorry, be kind of more polarizing, large scale, it kind of really bleeds a bit beyond the core purview of municipal governance and local government. I think that's when you go and ask the general public what they think. I thought the Olympic and the fluoride are two good avenues, two good things to go and ask the public about, because they are a bit above and beyond the city. It involves many more other levels of government, more people. It's the region. And I think that's, and also the fluoride, we can talk about later, but it's something that goes above and beyond just what's directly under a municipal purview. So
that makes sense. Okay, let me ask this final question then, because there'll be times when the administration recommends a path forward because they will say it benefits the city of Calgary as a whole, but your constituents will want you to vote the opposite way. So what would you do in those circumstances?
That's always hard, isn't it? As an elected official, should I be successful, it's my duty and goal to be honest and honest and true to not only myself, but my constituents and the city. And I will commit, that any decision that I make will always be in the best interest of this ward, but also in the best interest of the city. And even if that's an unpopular decision, having the background that I have, I have a tendency to explain a lot, and I try to. I'll try to my constituents, the ones who are not in agreement, to explain, the merits or the benefits of doing something that is maybe not that popular. But the one thing is, in a rule like this, the greater good or the greater benefit has to always prevail. So that's how I'll address that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the conversation today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. That is your Ward 3 candidate, Gurbir Nijjar.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.